Every year, 3.5 million dogs and cats overwhelm U.S. shelters, and 1.5 million are euthanized due to overpopulation. Now in Colorado, like I said, 5,000 dogs alone, not cats, were euthanized in 2023, and that was a 24% surge over the previous year. 2024, 2025 are not looking much better. So I want to tell you that this is preventable. This is another exercise in government trying to do the right thing and it not working out so well at the end of the day. But also it's about responsibility for these loving creatures who don't have another way to survive. They depend on us, but also about people being passionate about pets, but not necessarily committed to them when life gets hard or rough, no pun intended. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unleashed with Heidi Ganahl. So excited to be here with you today to talk not just politics, but about another favorite topic of mine, dogs. Dogs. Well, as many of you know, I'm the founder of Camp Bow Wow, the franchise company that is now the world's largest pet care franchise, I believe, with over 200 locations. Camp Bow Wow is doggy daycare, boarding, grooming, training, all the things related to dogs, and it's a camp for dogs. It's about where a dog can be a dog, a place where they can have fun, be safe, secure, and obviously it was a huge passion project of mine. I opened the first Camp Bow Wow in December of 2000, so it's been 25 years since the launch of the first location. And the business plan was born out of a love of dogs, of course, but also an entrepreneurial spirit that my first husband, Brian, and I shared. And Brian and I wrote up a business plan for this amazing place for dogs. Doggy daycare wasn't a thing back then. People were like, you're going to do what? Babysit dogs? That's crazy. Is that a thing? But it was a thing. It was starting to take off in cities around the country. And the first doggy daycare had opened in Parker, Colorado. Here in Colorado, that was the first one. And my husband and I thought it was the coolest thing. We'd watch the dogs come in and out. It was right next to my dad's business, and my husband and dad worked together. And we'd take our own dogs over there and thought, this is such a cool concept, like dogs actually playing and getting along and having fun together. And back at this specific location, it was just a warehouse, an empty warehouse. They had a kiddie pool, but the dogs just milled around, played with their friends, and thought it was really fun. So we took that idea and kind of jazzed it up and added a mountain lodge theme and very fun slogans, lots of puns. Camp Bow Wow was where a dog could be a dog and enjoy themselves, and where they would actually be excited to be away from their pet parents. And we wrote the business plan up, and shortly thereafter, my husband, Brian, was killed in a small plane crash. And my life changed dramatically after that. Of course, I was 27 years old. He was coming up on his 25th birthday. But the dream didn't die. The dream to start Camp Bow Wow kind of sat in my heart for a few years. I desperately tried to get my life back in order and get back on track, and just was really struggling. So my little brother Patrick came to me about 5 years after the plane crash and said, I think you need to find your passion again. What if we dig out that business plan that you and Brian wrote about the happiest place on earth for dogs and got it going? And I thought, babysitting dogs for a living. I've got a master's degree. I've been, in pharmaceutical sales and healthcare management. This isn't exactly the same thing, but it is my passion. And I would love to find something that I love to do. So let's go for it. So we did. We opened the first Camp Bow Wow just south of downtown Denver on Antique Row. That was in 2000, like I said, December of 2000. And it took off. We marketed it by me taking my daughter Tori to Wash Park and Platt Park and handing out dog bones, dog biscuits, with free coupons for a day at camp. And people started to come in. And boy, we thought we were just cranking when we had 25, 30 dogs at the facility. And it was growing like crazy. And veterinarians were like, what are you doing? You can't have a group of dogs together in a room. They'll hurt each other. But they loved it. The dogs loved it. And they grew to be great friends. They'd see each other every day or every few days when they came. And the concept really took off. So my brother thought of this amazing idea. Patrick thought to put a webcam up on a stick. Now, granted, you guys, this is in 2000, 2001. The internet was not huge yet. Like, we had a website, which was very revolutionary, but webcams were not a thing. And they were simply cameras that would take a picture every 60 seconds and post to the internet, to your website. And so for the first few months we had it, we would run around chasing the dogs, and our customers would say, "Can you hold my dog up to the webcam?" And we'd take this wiggly lab and hold him up to the camera and wait the 60 seconds for the camera to take the picture. It would post to the internet, and off we went. And people loved it. They fell in love with the idea of being able to make sure that their dogs were having a good time at the camp. And so the webcams were really instrumental in helping us build that franchise. We opened a second location about a year later in Broomfield, next to a busy vet clinic, and that one took off as well. So one of the clients up there said, "Have you thought about franchising?" And I thought, franchising? I don't really know much about it, but let's check into it. So we went to the franchise conference. I can't remember where it was that year. I think it was in Vegas. Thousands of people in the franchise industry. I met some amazing people, some mentors who took me under their wing and taught me everything I needed to know about launching the very first franchise location for Camp Bow Wow. Now, this was in 2003. Fast forward about a year, and we had opened maybe 8 to 10 franchises. I didn't have a lot of capital or money to put into growing it, but word was starting to spread. And one day the phone just started ringing off the hook. This was middle of 2005, probably summer. And I was like, why is everyone so interested in Camp Bow Wow all of a sudden? Well, come to find out, America Online, which back then, you guys, for you young'uns, this is going to be hard to believe, it was the only kind of popular internet site. And it was all about email, like getting your email on AOL.com. And they had 3 rotating big stories of the day. And one of those big stories was the next great franchise, Camp Bow Wow. And it had a picture of me with a cute little yellow lab puppy. I have no idea where they got this picture to this day, but I had sat next to a gal who was in the franchise industry, a writer, and she was writing an article for Business Week Online. And there weren't many women in franchising back then in 2000, let's see, 2, 3, at about that time. And so she wrote an article about the few women who were involved. And all of a sudden, they posted this story. And it took off. And we got over 1,000 franchise sales leads, at least. People calling from all over the country, like, I want to open my own doggy daycare. I want to open a Camp Bow Wow. And so our sales took off, and we started to grow incredibly fast. Well, along that ride, I opened a charity related to Camp Bow Wow because obviously all of us involved in this business were very passionate about dogs. We were always fostering this dog, rescuing that dog, helping with this rescue event, or helping a nonprofit, Denver Dumb Friends League, Max Fund, all the local charities, however we could. And so we decided to start the Bow Wow Buddies Foundation, which was our charity to run alongside Camp Bow Wow. And before we knew it, we were fostering dogs all through the system. And eventually, fast forward to 2014, when I sold Camp Bow Wow to VCA, the big veterinary chain, we had adopted out or rehomed over 10,000 dogs that were homeless at the time throughout those years. And I am more proud of that than any success around the business side. Like, it still warms my heart to think of all the franchisees giving the dogs a place to stay while we found them a home. And it was an incredible experience. It was so fulfilling to see all the dogs find their people. So that was something I was very passionate about. Well, one of the other things I was passionate about was government regulation and how it was interfering with my ability to grow the business and franchisees to open. And that was my entree into politics. I actually got involved through an organization called Job Creators Network, which was launched by Bernie Marcus, the founder of Home Depot, and the CEO, Alfredo Ortiz, and I hit it off. And I helped them with various efforts to fight back against regulations on small businesses as the CEO of Camp Bow Wow and the founder. And I got very frustrated with how the government got in the way of the business and growing it. So I became a very vocal, outspoken advocate for small business owners across the country, including Camp Bow Wow and our franchisees. So During that time, obviously, I started to learn more about politics and became more passionate about it. And that's what led me to run for office in 2016 after I'd sold Camp Bow Wow just shortly after, had 3 young kids and a teenager. But I wanted to give back. I wanted to lend a paw, I said. And so I ran for regent at the University of Colorado in 2016 because I was passionate about politics. I was passionate about small business. I was passionate about education. And of course, I was passionate about my University of Colorado Buffaloes, which I'm an alumni of. So all those kind of worlds collided, and I ran to be the regent at large statewide for the University of Colorado. And we're one of only 4 states that elects our board of regents. So I had to run for office statewide. And I actually beat, in an upset, a gal who was part of the blueprint, part of the crafting of the taking over of Colorado with Jared Polis. Her name was Alice Madden. She was a formidable opponent, and I wasn't supposed to win, but I did. And I started my term for 6 years as a CU regent, and then obviously ran for governor later. Well, along the way, I stayed a bit involved in animal rescue. It was still a passion of mine. And here and there, I'd foster a dog or help some friends who are in rescue. And it hasn't left my passion. It hasn't left my heart. Recently, I got asked to help on some issues around dog rescue, animal welfare, and a lot of my old world came back, and I want to tell you about it and tell you some of the battles that we're up against in Colorado around dogs and cats that don't have homes. It's one of the worst times in recent decades for animal rescue in Colorado. A lot of dogs are being euthanized and cats here in Colorado. Actually, 5,000 dogs were killed in 2023, euthanized in shelters as they buckled under the massive flow of unsterilized pets and rescues being submitted or dogs being given back to the shelters over the last few years. Maybe that's from COVID. Maybe it's from the economy, the recession that happened over the last few years. I'm not really sure. And 1.5 million are euthanized due to overpopulation. Now in Colorado, like I said, 5,000 dogs alone, not cats, were euthanized in 2023. And that was a 24% surge over the previous year. 2024, 2025 are not looking much better. So I want to tell you that this is preventable. This is another exercise in government trying to do the right thing and it not working out so well at the end of the day. But also it's about responsibility for these loving creatures who don't have another way to survive. They depend on us, but also about people being passionate about pets, but not necessarily committed to them when life gets hard or rough, no pun intended. So I want to tell you how we can solve this problem and what's going on right now related to politics in Colorado and how this ties to so many dogs being surrendered and euthanized in Colorado shelters. One of the most important things about animals in Colorado, or one of the most pressing burdens our shelters face, is that most of the animals that are submitted to the shelters or turned over are not spayed or neutered. So the shelter can either take the cost of doing that and do it up front, or they can wait until an animal is adopted and ask the person adopting them to do it, or do it for them and charge them a fee. Well, there's lots of issues around this, but one of the things that's super important is that we spay and neuter as many animals as possible. Then there's fewer animals that need homes. There's fewer animals that get put into shelters that provided to rescues. And that way, more and more animals have homes, the more that we control the population, I guess is the right way to say it. So while thousands of dogs and cats within our own state remain homeless or at risk, animals are continuously being imported from out of state. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that there are rescues that bring in puppies from out of state who need a home under the guise of helping the overpopulation problem and charge a lot of money to adopt. So maybe $500, $1,000 for adoption fees. And they actually make money on this effort. And they're nonprofits, but they make a huge amount of revenue. They pay big salaries to their staff. And I don't believe their heart's in the right place. Now, get this, you guys, 70% of imported dogs, like puppies that are brought in to be rehomed or adopted out, come from just 5 big rescues in Colorado. So if you think about it, 5 nonprofits that claim to be helping the overpopulation problem are importing 70% of the dogs in from out of state that are overwhelming the shelters right now and making it very difficult for the good guys to win and to find dogs homes. And so that's what I want to specifically focus on today is the importation of dogs from out of state, the lack of review over this importation, and how that complicates the ability to find all of our animals here in Colorado that need a home, and not have to euthanize them, not to have to see these huge spikes in killing adoptable pets. So let's talk about for a minute DORA. DORA is a department. It's the Department of Regulatory Agencies, actually. It's a big bureaucracy in Colorado. And underneath DORA, there are certain departments, right? And so underneath DORA, which is, again, the Office of Policy, Research, and Regulatory Reform, that studied each program before its sunset date and recommends whether to continue a program, make changes like reform or restructure it, or end it entirely. So there's DORA, which is the Department of Regulatory Agencies, and it has an office underneath it called the Office of Policy, Research, and Regulatory Reform, or OPRRR, and they study each program before its sunset date and recommends whether to continue, make changes, or end the program entirely. Now, I said it twice because it's really important to what we're going to talk about today, which is solving this problem and making sure that every dog and cat that is surrendered or doesn't have a home gets a home. So what is being reviewed by DORA? Why are the coming weeks so important to this whole equation? Because the reason I'm doing this podcast today is to alert you that there are several important things coming up. And one of those is the DORA review of a program called PACFA. Now, PACFA is the Pet Animal Care Facilities Act. And PACFA is kind of an agency or an act that delegates employees through the state to oversee or regulate animal shelters, rescues, breeders, boarding and training facilities like Camp Bow Wow. So I know a lot about PACFA and have had many interactions with them. In fact, I know the head of PACFA very well. He worked for Camp Bow Wow at one point. It also oversees retail pet stores and transporters. So those are people who might bring in the puppies from out of state to find them homes here. Now, PACFA, what it's supposed to do is ensure that these various facilities and programs are licensed, inspected, they follow humane standards of care. That's important. It's important to know that there's someone overseeing all of these facilities, rescues, shelters, organizations, Camp Bow Wows, Dogtopias, etc., making sure they're keeping the animals safe, taking good care of them. I do think there's a role for government in some cases, and this is a good role because unfortunately there's bad actors out there too. So this current PACFA law and agency, the overview of the agency is set to expire in 2026 unless it's renewed. So DORA's review process is underway right now in 2025, and it's going to release its official report towards the end of October. So we're close. It's in the next few weeks, right? So we have a few weeks to get the word out, have people respond, and provide input for that official report. Now, the Colorado legislature, the House and the Senate here in Colorado, will then decide in 2026 in the session in the first part of the year whether to continue PACFA with or without changes or to let it sunset or end. That's why it's called a sunset review. Now, the purpose of the review is to evaluate, is PACFA necessary to protect the animals and consumers? I would say yes. Is it being administered efficiently and fairly? No, not at all. That's the problem. We're going to talk about that. Is there transparency and accountability? No, not at all. We're going to talk about that. Is the public interest being served? And specifically, are these animals being served? I would suggest no, not as it stands now. There need to be changes, and there need to be held accountable for protecting these animals and protecting our public dollars that go towards helping all these animals? And then finally, are there duplications or gaps with other programs, like a new division that was created by Governor Polis and his first man, Marlin, who's very engaged in animal welfare and very vocal about it. It's called the Animal Welfare Division. So what they do is they gather public input, they get data on licensing, different violations and enforcement, and then they get feedback from shelters, rescues, breeders, and citizens just like you. And it's important that everyone speak up. A lot of people ask me, like, what can I do about politics today? How can I make a difference? Well, like, I just feel like it doesn't make any difference what I do. Here's a way you can make a difference, especially if you love dogs and cats. Dogs and kitties, they need our help. They can't speak for themselves, so you can speak for them. And I bet you can find 30 minutes to an hour in the next couple of weeks to help make this division, this law, PACFA, better, so that there are fewer animals that don't have a home that are getting euthanized or, put into homes that are not appropriate. This is really, really important to this equation. So why does this matter right now? I mentioned it briefly, but let's dig in. The new Animal Welfare Division, which was created by House Bill 24-1458, so just in 2024, now oversees PACFA. It oversees the Pet Animal Care Facilities Act. So the 2026 review coming up in the next legislative session, which is January through May of next year, is the first major test of whether this new division is working, whether it's transparent and effective, and whether Colorado animals are truly better protected by the governor and his first man, who is passionate about these things, but I think about a bit misguided on how to protect animals, actually. So this is our chance, dog lovers, kitty lovers of Colorado, to make a difference, to speak up for rural shelters and local dogs, to demand public reporting and accountability, to demand balanced enforcement, not picking favorites, but making sure everyone's playing by the same rules to protect the animals, and to ensure that Colorado dogs and cats come first and that our tax dollars are making sure that happens. So that's a big deal, you guys. There's a lot of weight on you to get involved, speak up, and make a difference here. Now, why does your voice matter? Well, Dora welcomes public comments during the review. So advocates, rescues, shelters, and citizens can all submit input on what's working and what's not. And if you need help on crafting your statement, we are happy to help with that process. You can just email me, HeidiGanahl@gmail.com, and I will direct you to the right people to help you help the animals. So right now, through the end of 2025, we've got a couple months left, is the key time to share your experiences and your recommendations. And we have lots of recommendations. So let's talk about Colorado for a minute. 75 to 80% of dogs that are turned into shelters are not sterilized. They're not spayed or neutered. And we've got a 24% euthanasia spike in 2023. So euthanasia rates are insane. They're going through the roof. We've got tons of dogs being turned in that aren't spayed or neutered. So that cost either gets put onto the shelter once they adopt a dog out or before they adopt a dog out, or it gets put on the new owner. And how do you make sure the new owner actually makes that happen? Well, if you require a deposit, who's going to enforce that they actually do it and follow through? They might not get their $10 deposit back, but it might be less of trouble and less expensive to just not worry about it and let the dog or cat not be spayed or neutered. That's a problem. We talked about the 5 big rescues in Colorado, bringing in over 70% of imported dogs into Colorado. So that's bringing in thousands of puppies into Colorado when we have thousands here, thousands of dogs that need homes already. So we've first got to take care of the dogs here in Colorado before we can open our borders to the rest of the United States to bring in puppies from all over the place. The other problem is sometimes they bring disease with them. Sometimes rescues are haphazard. They aren't making sure that these puppies are healthy. You adopt a puppy on a huge adoption fee because that's how they make their money and hire more people and pay themselves really good salaries. And the puppy might have parvo. It might have ringworm. It might get very, very ill. And there's not usually a lot of recourse because you sign these heavy duty contracts that you won't hold anyone accountable if the dog dies. So it's a very sad situation. And the 5 biggest rescues that we talked about that import over 70% of the puppies and dogs coming in from out of state. And keep an eye out for these names: Soul Dog, Lifeline, Big Bones, Animal Friends Alliance, and Rocky Mountain Puppy Rescue. Those are the ones that are coming in to Colorado that we have to keep an eye on. And what I mean by keep an eye on, if you want to adopt a puppy and these are one of the rescues, well, any rescue you go to, you should say, where did this puppy come from? I need to understand how the puppy ended up here in Colorado. And how much money do you bring in, Mr. Rescue? How much of that money goes to administration? How many puppies do you bring in from out of state? And why aren't you taking better care of the animals here, especially in rural Colorado? That's a really important question to ask. So let's look at the big picture, the United States. We have over 6.7 million female dogs and 6.5 million female cats living in U.S. households right now. It's a lot of kitties and dogs that aren't spayed that can have puppies or kittens. That's how this kind of starts, this whole problem. So if we focus on the animals already in homes, that's where we can make the biggest difference. So if we can increase the spay-neuter rate by just 3%, it would reduce the number of future puppies and kittens by more than 25% within 3 years. So that's where education and subsidies can be the cornerstone of fixing this problem. We've got to make sure everyone who has cats and dogs in their homes, make sure they're spayed and neutered. Now, if you're a licensed breeder, you raise AKC Golden Retriever puppies, got it. There can be exceptions for certain things. I'm not arguing that. What I'm arguing is if you adopt an animal or you don't intend for that cat or dog to have puppies or kittens, which you better have a good reason because there's so many that are adoptable out there, please make sure that they are spayed or neutered. There's lots of low-cost spay-neuter programs out there that will help pay for it. It's just a matter of getting it done. Now, the other part is that we need to ask shelters and rescues to do their part. Now, more Americans acquire their pets from rescues or shelters than any other source. And most, but not all, of the 2.5 million dogs and cats that are adopted from shelters each year are spayed or neutered before they're adopted. But in some states, California, New York, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Iowa, I think Colorado too, I have to verify that, agencies can collect a deposit from adopters who promise to have their pets spayed or neutered later. The problem is that deposits are often less than the cost of surgery, and it makes it cheaper to just not do it. And they skip spay and neutering and they forfeit the deposit. So agencies rarely have resources to track compliance, like track people down and make sure that they spayed or neutered the animal. And then if they didn't, how are you going to force them to do that? Or are you going to take the animal back? That's going to cause a big ruckus. Then you got the animal back in the shelter. It's a mess. So the solution is to make sure all pets that are adopted from shelters and rescues are spayed or neutered before they go out the door, before they're adopted. Now that's expensive. That costs money. So if you want to donate to your local rescues or shelters, you can earmark the money so that it goes towards spay and neuter for dogs that are about to be adopted. But this is really the key to solving the problem of the dogs and the cats who are incredible animals who need a home, who deserve a home, being euthanized, and Colorado's euthanasia rate's going up 24%. Like, that's where it starts, right there. It starts in your own home, in your own neighborhood. That's one of the most important ways that you can help. All right, so what does that mean for all of you listening? First, it means if you're going to adopt an animal, ask really good questions of the place you're going to adopt. Second, if you're going to donate to a rescue or shelter, ask questions. Where is this money going? How many dogs or cats are you importing from out of state? Why are you doing that? What are your adoption fees? Are you making money? Like, what's your administration fee? How much money are you paying to administrators and salaries and overhead? Like, that has to be in control. You need to make sure as much of that money as possible is going towards spay and neutering, adopting out dogs, rescuing dogs, whatever that means. So let's talk about true rescue. What does it mean? Like, what is true rescue about? It's about transformation, not just transactions. We got to stop this vicious cycle of just continuing to be on this hamster wheel of, okay, we're not spaying and neutering enough. So there's lots of puppies and kittens that are being produced that need a home. There's not enough homes. So we're having to euthanize, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. So that's what I mean by transformation, not transaction. So rescue means actually stepping in to save dogs that are truly in need, those that are surrendered, that are stray, that are neglected, that are at risk of euthanasia, and putting them into wonderful homes after they heal, they're evaluated, and they're carefully placed into homes that fit their lives. That's really important so they don't get relinquished again, like put back in the shelter system again. So training is really important. There's some amazing people. I'm talking to you, Amy Sadler, who do training for dogs that have really bad behavioral programs, and Brandy and Eric, and so many awesome trainers who work really hard to help dogs stay in their homes once they're adopted, because naughty dogs are hard. We know that, but we love them anyway, and we want to keep them in the homes, but it takes a lot of commitment to do that. Now, all of this is rooted in love, accountability, and honesty. It's not about high volume intake or out of state pipelines. We got to start here in Colorado and fix the problem here before we can take lots of puppies and dogs from out of state and bring them into Colorado. That's just my take. Now, every organization that rescues or shelters dog or rehomes dogs should be absolutely transparent about where their dogs come from. It is misleading to consumers when groups use a Colorado name for the rescue when they import the majority of their dogs from other states. They've got to disclose that, and they've got to explain why they're doing it and why they aren't helping solve the problem in Colorado first. At adoption events and in communications, every rescue should talk about where they source their dogs. And using a name that represents Colorado while bringing in dogs from out of state is not transparent or honest. It's wrong. Now, PACFA should be present at adoption events and transports and keep an eye on this as much as they can. Rescues skate because they're not a brick and mortar like a shelter, and shelters are more transparent. So rescues kind of have the pop-up events, or they are in a parking lot, or they host an event at a fair, a festival. It's a little bit harder to watch them. But honestly, all organizations who import animals in to adopt out should be licensed as importers. And you know me, I'm not a big regulation girl. I don't like the government regulating a lot of things, but things have gotten out of control in this area. It's why we have skyrocketing euthanasia rates, and too many dogs and kitties versus how many good homes there are. So I think they should be licensed as importers and have rules and oversight based on how much volume they have and how transparent they're being. And that goes on to the shoulders of PACFA, that agency I was telling you about, which is why it's so important that all of us weigh in to Dora, who's doing the review on PACFA before the end of the year, and tell them what we need them to do to keep an eye on this and get this in check. So what is a fair solution? To restore fairness and truth, PACFA should develop an importer license and registration, like I just talked about, specifically for organizations whose primary intake is from out of state. So those folks, those organizations, those nonprofits who make millions of dollars in adoption fees by bringing in puppies and kittens from out of state. It's not cool. And the license could be based on volume and transparency. It could establish fees that go into a fund to help Colorado dogs and families. And it can fund pet retention programs like food, vet care, training, crisis aid to keep dogs in their home once they're naughty and the owner is thinking about adopting or relinquishing them to a shelter or rescue, or once they're adopted and they're being naughty, they need some training, support to make sure they stay in that home. Or if the economy hits, someone loses their job, we've got to all rally together to make sure that dogs stay in a home once they're placed in that home. Now, why this matters now, I'm going to repeat this, and we talked about it earlier. When Governor Polis created the new Division of Animal Welfare by merging PACFA with the Bureau of Animal Protection, the state promised something really important, and why a lot of people were on board with that. And it was transparency, education, and community engagement. But today, that's not happening. Imagine that. It's not happening in the government run by Jared Polis. Don't get me started. There's serious gaps. So right now, there's no public inspection reports or violation summaries. So the public can't hold this agency accountable or the rescues or shelters because none of it's public. That's crazy. Like, the government works for us and they are overseeing these shelters and rescues to make sure that our taxpayer dollars are spent well, but also to make sure these animals are protected. So we need public inspection reports and violation summaries. We need oversight to be good and valuable and effective, using different checklists and publishing results. It's not happening right now. There's inconsistent oversight. We need self-reported statistics to be complete and available. Right now, they're not. They're incomplete and unavailable. So once a place gets a review or somebody gets an inspection, they're not reporting anything. They're not helping that process, and they're not voluntarily telling us what's going on in their organization, which is wrong. And, if I were a donor of one of these big rescue organizations, I'd be asking questions because I want my dollars spent on actually rescuing and rehoming the dogs and cats and bunnies and all the other animals, and making sure that my dollars are spent well and held accountable, and there's transparency. So even if this isn't about the government, this is about donors, whatever role you play, it's important to demand this. And finally, there's no clear public education or advocacy platform that was promised through creating this new division of animal welfare. Oh, the bureaucracy that Jared Polis loves to create. The government has grown so big under his governorship. It would be so nice to get someone in who actually knows how to run a government efficiently and holds people accountable, make sure the money's spent well, make sure whoever's supposed to be protected with those dollars is actually protected. It's not happening right now. I want to give you some examples that show you the problem, and I'm going to name names. Mamco, it's a big rescue. Can't remember what the acronym is for, but their license was suspended after sick puppies weren't isolated and 4 were euthanized. It took hundreds of violations over years before PACFA or the government took action. Now, the cost versus 500,000 state health plus hundreds of consumers and families, they suffer in these circumstances. The cost is insane to not get a grip on these violations, because what happens is the puppy gets adopted out, it's sick, the new owner has to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, this is all the owners collectively, but owners have to pay thousands of dollars to help these puppies get healthy, and they were adopted to them as sick because no one's overseeing this to make sure that the violations are cured or that these rescues are doing the right thing. The next one, New Hope Rescue in Colorado Springs, summarily suspended for failure to treat and isolate animals. That case also took years to address. And then a Delta County breeder in 2025, they seized 160 dogs, and the state admitted more inspections should have happened. PACFA said that themselves. The agency said more inspections should have happened. So ask for help. Ask for resources if that's the case. You've got a first gentleman who's very interested in animal welfare and a governor who does what his first gentleman tells him to do around this topic. Let's make it work. Let's make it effective. You have a couple years left in office. Let's make sure we fix this problem. So these examples show that the system is not working as intended, and the public deserves honest reporting, consistent enforcement, and clear accountability. Now, our goal with putting this information out, my goal as Heidi Ganahl with my Unleashed podcast and so many of the activists who help us put together all this information and advocate for the right solutions that we work together with, it's not to divide, but it's to shine light and build a system where truth, which is what Rocky Mountain Boys is all about, and Unleashed as the podcast, and compassion, they walk together. And where Colorado's own dogs and kitties get the first chance at life, not the last chance. We've got to take care of our own first. So I've given you a ton of information. What's the critical call to action here? The call to action is do some research. Email me if you need to, HeidiGanahl@gmail.com, and I'll get you in touch with the right people. You need to reach out to Dora to comment on the PACFA review about their sunset review as soon as possible, because the report comes out at the end of October. And then legislation is going to be reviewed, or the legislative body is going to review this in January when they go back into session. So you have a local representative that represents your area, and you have a state senator that represents your area. call them, email them, contact them, go to their office and say, I want this to be fixed. It is absolutely unacceptable that we had a 23% increase in euthanasia, 24% increase in euthanasia in Colorado in 2024 for our animals. I flipped the numbers, a 24% increase in 2023. That's absolutely unacceptable. Every animal in Colorado that needs a home should have a home that's adoptable. And we shouldn't be bringing in animals from out of state. Get involved with these rescues. Call these rescues. Call them out that are importing dogs at crazy rates. We will post the information about who those rescues are and their contact. Call them out. Tell them to knock it off, to take care of the animals here before they bring in puppies and kitties that are often sick, that take a lot of resources from the dogs and cats that are Colorado owned and adoptable, and make sure they're taken care of first. So thank you for listening. This is obviously a topic I'm very passionate about. This is a problem that can be fixed if we're all diligent about making sure our own animals and the people that we know, their animals, are spayed and neutered, and that dogs that need a home have resources around them, like they're put in a good shelter, a good rescue. We help get them a good home, and then we help support the new owners with training, food, vet care, whatever it is, to keep them in that home. And then we hold these rescues and shelters accountable that are bringing in thousands of puppies that are muddying the waters and keeping our dogs and our puppies and our kitties from getting good homes. So thank you for listening today. I know this is a little bit of not a typical topic that we talk about on Unleashed outside of politics, but this is political, and you can hold your legislators accountable for this. You can hold the governor accountable and his first gentleman, and you can make sure that rescues and shelters are doing the right thing, and that PACFA is not sunsetted, the agency doesn't go away, and that they do better for us. They provide transparency, accountability. They make sure the people doing this work have a good heart, have good intentions, and are doing the right things for animals. So have a doggone great day, and we'll tackle this problem and make sure every doggy and kitty in Colorado has a good home together.